Welcome to the 2022 IoT Logistics Trends. We will be getting started in just a few minutes. Thanks for joining us at the 2022 IoT Logistics Trends. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining us for the 2022 IoT Logistics Trends. We're waiting for people to join in since it's right at the top of the hour, so we'll start in just a minute. Thanks. All right, thanks for joining. We're glad you could join us this afternoon. We're excited to talk about the 2022 IoT Logistics Trends. With me this morning, I've got Michael Jenkins, who is the VP of Development for Link Labs. Michael has more than 20 years of sales experience, and he's an innovative and results-oriented executive with a proven track record in developing and championing creative IoT logistics solutions to meet business objectives while increasing revenues and profits. In his previous role at AT&T, Michael led a highly experienced team of engineering, sales, and consulting professionals that worked with some of AT&T's largest global customers. Michael's extensive background in developing enterprise IoT solutions provides him with the expertise and experience to assist companies in transforming their businesses through the adoption of emerging technologies. Michael has an MBA in Finance and Management Information Systems from the University of Georgia. Michael, it's great to have you today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
We also have Stas, who is the Chief Operations Officer at Link Labs. He has over 20 years of executive leadership experience in the wireless consumer electronics industry, spanning telecommunications carriers, OEM electronics, and contract device manufacturers, enterprise software applications and service providers, and supply chain management providers. At Jabil Circuits, an electronics design, manufacturing, and product management services company, Stas led the company's global mobility aftermarket services division with mobile phone repair, remanufacturing, and refurbishment operations in 5 countries. He was VP of Global Strategic Alliances at Celebrite, a technology company delivering solutions for mobile lifecycle management and forensics, heading its global partnership and M&A activities in the aftermarket services domain, and later SVP of Operations at XVO Logistics. Stas also has an MBA in Finance and Marketing from San Francisco State University. Great to have you, Stas.
Thanks for the introduction, Jennifer.
Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping things. Feel free to make this interactive. If you've got questions, you can enter them into the questions box. If they're related to this particular trend that we're talking about, we'll hit some of those questions as we go through the presentation. Otherwise, we'll also have a general Q&A at the end of the presentation. And you can reach that in the questions or in the chat as well. Great, thanks for joining. Stas, I'll let you take it.
Okay, agenda, let's get started. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining. Looking forward to going through some material that we put together for this webinar. We'd like to start off with a brief overview of Link Labs and our legacy in the IoT domain and the experience we've gained over the past 7 or 8 years in this business before we dive into 5 IoT logistics trends that we've seen develop over the past few years, and especially very recently with what has been, as everyone knows, a very dynamic and disrupted market and industry since the pandemic has thrown us all a lot of curveballs really across all industries. We'd like to share with you our perspectives from our interactions, really with many customers and many different verticals, though the focus today is going to be on the logistics industry. Then we'd like to take a few minutes to present and describe our IoT solution, which we call AirFinder, the underlying technologies that we employ in the solutions architecture, and how we solve for tracking and monitoring needs in both indoor environments or at our client sites, as well as when assets go out into the wild, so to speak, and need to operate and communicate outside of an IoT infrastructure. And then finally, we'll wrap up with a brief Q&A session that, as Jennifer mentioned, feel free to chat your questions along the way and some final thoughts. So with that, let's go to the next slide. So Link Labs was founded in 2014 by a group of engineers who had already worked in this space for about 10 years prior to that. And today we're an end-to-end IoT location and monitoring platform provider built around our what we call our AirFinder on-site and AirFinder everywhere solutions. We demonstrated our ability to rapidly build and deploy really at some tremendous scale, especially with some key partners with over 100,000, really more than 150,000 devices deployed with over 1 billion messages or events being generated monthly, and a growing patent portfolio that we're particularly proud of that demonstrates how we have been and continue to innovate in this space. Next slide. Just in the last actually year or two, we've won a number of awards, which we're also particularly proud of. These are internationally recognized and show how we are able to compete against really many different companies and many different solutions in a vetted way. So we're proud to share the stage with some previous winners that are of course household names. So so with that, let's go to the trends discussion. So the first trend we'd like to discuss is what we call digital transformation and criticality. Obviously, the pandemic has created tremendous disruptions throughout the economy, but COVID has really highlighted other issues that were already impacting and transforming how we do business in a number of ways, and most especially in the supply chain industry. The demand for talent in the labor market has become highly competitive, and it's outpacing the supply. Inflationary pressures are further driving up the cost of labor, labor efficiency, and the whole notion of needing to do more with less people, having to replace for attrition, not to mention what the temporary gaps in available personnel can do to overall production capacity, and the time and effort required to train new personnel, and how long it takes for them to become as fully productive as more tenured employees. All of this is creating further push towards increased levels of automation. And along with this, there is the need for quality underlying process data, which of course is enabled by IoT solutions. Layer on top of this, the tremendous increase in consumer demand, and also the volatility of that demand, supply chain shortages, new product introductions, and seasonality. All of these things create the need to be able to flex labor up and down more than ever before. In turn, all of this is driving the need to implement all kinds of innovative solutions. And again, IoT is an important enabler for many of these approaches. The key point here is that we don't believe these are short-term problems. And in fact, we think these consumption patterns have permanently shifted. Ultimately, I think it's all about visibility in your processes, visibility into where your materials are, your finished goods, your people, your other assets and tools, where everything is and how it's flowing and moving and performing. Visibility to bottlenecks, to conditions or parameters going out of range to normal expectations. So things like inventory or production dwell times being exceeded, or temperature limitations being violated, or asset flow not moving the way it's meant to move. So where before IoT was a nice to have, I would say that now more than ever before, I guess my point is that you need visibility into the data and the analytics, and IoT provides this. So it's gone from that nice to have to really being mission critical. Michael, don't know if you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'll just jump in there, Stas, thanks. We have seen, as you were mentioning, around labor productivity, but, workflow improvements. Many companies are just looking at how can they improve the flow of their people, looking at, how are people moving around on a daily basis? How are they, where are they finding bottlenecks along the way? So they can make improvements and potentially do the same work with less people. And right now with the labor market the way it is, that's become extremely important. Another use case we've seen, and you kind of highlight a little bit of it there on this slide with the retirement boom, but it's around assisted living facilities and the ability to track residents and understand, where they should go, where they shouldn't go, and the ability to address things when people are in a place that they shouldn't be. So those are some of the things that we're seeing become very important right now in this market.
We've seen over 4 million workers a month voluntarily leaving their positions. And there's almost 11 million job openings in the US. And so, the labor productivity and visibility into those processes is really starting to impact logistics companies.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great.
So let's jump to the next trend here if we can. Now I'll talk a little bit about supply chain challenges. I think Stas mentioned this, and I think this is foremost on everybody's mind right now, is the challenges in the supply chain, everything from lack of workers to lack of parts, as well as delays and added cost in shipping. These challenges have really increased the need for companies to, have better warehouse management systems, improve on systems to help gain the better utilization of people, since hiring additional personnel can be very challenging right now. We just talked about that just a little bit. And the need for better visibility throughout your supply chain. This has become really important and kind of essential for companies to really understand where product is in a real-time basis so that they can understand the challenges and where can they make improvements. Industries that are struggling the most with these supply chain challenges will need to readdress their IoT strategies to remain ahead of their competitors, or they're going to fall behind. Everyone's going to need to implement some form of an IoT solution that fits their needs and solves their biggest challenges. Stas, anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I'll just jump in here briefly. We see this as a ladder of sorts that our customers need to climb, so to speak. The first rung or phase is the recognition for an increased level of visibility beyond what they may currently have, or what they have may simply not be good enough. Then that moves us to the use case development phase around key needs and what the ROI could look like before we go on to research various IoT solutions and strategies that could best meet the needs of the customer, that address specific pain points and deliver value in the most economic way, and with the required level of quality and reliability. Finally, there's the implementation stage, which is critical to the overall success of IoT projects. And most often, this is where they fail to scale or fall by the wayside. A good IoT partner should go through this journey, as we like to call it, with you or the customer, as a way to ensure the overall success of an IoT deployment, and that it successfully solves for the specific challenges that you're looking to address. Let's go to the next slide. So asset tracking has been around for 20 years now, and but where it could be applied was limited by the cost to deploy and maintain these solutions and the underlying economics of the value being delivered. The good news is that costs have come down, especially while market volumes have exploded, while the recognition of the benefits of asset tracking has increased. And at the same time, capabilities have improved through all kinds of technology innovation. For example, we're especially proud of and excited about our XLE technology and what that delivers beyond Bluetooth Low Energy, or BLE, where we can deliver location precision up to around a meter with tremendous tag battery life for a fraction of the cost of, say, an ultra-wideband solution, where maybe you don't need the centimeter level precision that ultra-wideband can deliver, but at the same time, plus or minus 1 beacon of accuracy, which is how traditional BLE location technology works, and what it delivers is simply not good enough. So this really opens up the potential use cases where asset tracking can and is now being deployed. So where we, previously you'd only see tagging very high value assets, like vaccines. Suddenly it's beginning to make economic sense to be able to track and locate, say, pallets of lower value and materials, or totes, or individual shipping boxes or containers, especially if you've already invested in your IoT infrastructure for some other use case or application, because the tag cost is so much lower and the size or form factor is much more amenable to be attached to, say, a beer keg, because you're looking at a tag the size of a postage stamp that's maybe no more than 5 millimeters thick. That's available today, and in the future we'll be able to get even smaller size tags. Since our AirFinder tag firmware, we've been able to make, using this, we've been able to make our tag energy consumption so low and efficient that the size of the battery required to deliver the same battery life is much smaller. So the tag can be smaller and less expensive. So now all of a sudden we're looking at deployments much more broadly in warehousing and logistics. As you can imagine, as we drive down the cost curve, and to stay, I guess, with the alcohol theme with beer kegs. If you think of logistics around wine distribution, for example, before we could have been tracking a pallet and surmised that wherever the pallet went, so did everything on the pallet. But a lower and lower tag cost level allows you to track at the package or carton level, say the 12-pack box of wine. And eventually you get down to the item level with something like printable tags, maybe with no batteries at all, that take advantage of energy harvesting to generate a message, and associating with a smarter and more capable tag to backhaul that information and associate it with a location, which I think Michael is actually teeing you up for the next slide. So why don't we go to the next slide?
Let's jump to the next slide, because I think this feature that we just launched recently really drives home this message around this. You know, we've brought down the cost curve here on a lot of things, and what's really interesting with this feature is, you know, you can't always afford to put a GPS tracker on every device, especially, you know, those leaving your building. So the key is to use a lower cost BLE tag. There's lots of options in this environment of just a simple BLE tag. And then when your assets leave your building, this feature allows our super tag that does have GPS and cellular to function as a gateway. It will then scan for any BLE tags that are in its environment, and then it reports the presence of all these tags back up along with its location to the cloud. Some of the use cases include, it makes it very affordable and an easy way to track a group of lower cost assets. Like Stas was saying, if you want to look at tracking all of the wine boxes that are actually on a pallet, or it could be anything else like that, where you're tracking, you know, down to a much lower level than you would have wanted to or been able to previously. It's also a great way to track assets inside a large facility where you're using our indoor tracking platform. And then when they move to another location, now you're able to track them along their route to the other destination by combining that indoor tag with our outdoor tags. You know, some of the benefits of this solution is that, you know, like I mentioned, it uses a much lower cost tag, makes it much more affordable to track smaller items or less expensive items. And it actually makes your GPS trackers much more valuable as well.
Couple questions here. How long do those BLE tags usually last?
Yeah, it's really, you know, depends on the tag itself, but this can be anywhere from a year to 3 years. And it's going to depend on how much often you want it reporting, the environment, all those things come into play as well. But I will say, go ahead, Stas.
Yeah, I was just going to mention, and then we employ all kinds of technology at the firmware level on our tags. So we can take advantage of things like, you know, because the driver around battery life is the frequency with which you do location updates and send that information back. So if you're only interested in when an asset actually moves and ends up at a new location, it's unnecessary to continue to provide those updates. And so when you have intelligence at the tag level, the tag knows, well, I haven't moved since yesterday, so other than providing maybe a heartbeat message to let you know that I'm still alive, it's really unnecessary for me to, you know, conduct a location update and send that information back. And so it would only do that when it actually begins to move, other than some other, you know, potentially pre-programmed and upgradable or changeable frequency update that you want to provide on that. Conversely, you can also do it, hey, I'm not interested in providing location updates when I'm moving, only when I stop moving and end up wherever I need to be. So it's techniques like this that can really extend your battery life, amongst, you know, some other things as well. And then the tag can adapt and adjust. So for example, if we need to get a minimum of 3 years worth of battery life, and we find for whatever reason we're doing a lot more updates, then we can go ahead and change some of the parameters around that to ensure that we don't run out of battery life before the expected end of life.
And how much do the BLE tags usually cost?
Yeah, they're around about $20 at a retail level. So it's going to depend on the exact tag, but it can be anywhere from 15 to say 20.
Yeah, and the only other thing I would add there is there's, and we're going to be talking about this a lot, is this downward pressure on cost. And so certainly with volume, and as you know, we talked about this democratization of the tag ecosystem and IoT and in general, we have seen the cost come down tremendously. So you can actually get a lot lower than that. And with newly emerging technologies like, printable tags and so forth that take advantage of energy harvesting, you can get down to the below $1 per tag cost ultimately. But you've got to do that in conjunction with how you're deploying your broader IoT location infrastructure.
And then one last question, what other things besides location do the tags track?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, and it depends on the tag. Like, for example, the super tag that Michael was describing here in this hub application, that actually has an accelerometer that I've already mentioned, temperature and humidity monitors that are built into the device. We can also connect into our IoT infrastructure other sensors that maybe that's all they do is a particular type of monitoring. And we've gotten into things as exotic as bed bug monitoring, using believe it or not, in the hotel industry, a bed bug sensor to and connect that into your IoT infrastructure that's already deployed in the hotel, or a flood sensor would be another example of a use case. So there are a variety of different sensors, and the good news for us is that, and that's why we adopted BLE as our underlying tag technology, because there's such a huge ecosystem of tags and sensors that are out there that we can leverage and take advantage of depending on use case requirements from our customers.
Sounds good. Let's move to market maturation.
Yeah, so the next trend we're seeing is how the asset tracking market is really separating into one-way asset tracking and returnable asset tracking. So earlier I talked about, again, the democratization of asset tracking. I mentioned that as the cost of the technologies come down, it becomes more viable to track items of lower and lower value. Now we've been tracking returnable assets for a while, like shipping fixtures or racks or containers, which, by the way, gives you the opportunity to recover and reuse the tag, or simply continue to monitor that same asset without any additional touch time. What's important here is being able to deliver long operational life or long battery life, since it may not be practical to replace the batteries, or the disruption or the lack of ease in doing so makes you really want to drive down the frequency of having to do so, replace those batteries. In other words, we're looking for years of battery life instead of months or a year or two. And also doing more than just tracking, like also doing, as we discussed, environmental condition monitoring, like temperature and humidity and shock and so forth. Then on the one-way side, it's all about low cost and therefore disposability, where the tag is essentially a sacrificial device that, again, delivers that visibility and the underlying asset, and that the underlying asset or product made it to wherever it was supposed to go, and perhaps that it didn't exceed environmental condition constraints. But since the battery can be much smaller, this helps with both cost and form factor. So going back to returnable assets, this captures a number of reusable assets like like pallets or carts or totes or other types of shipping containers or fixtures. Now, if you're able to reliably track these types of assets, then you're able to support monitoring their flow through a logistics loop that may begin with the manufacturer or the producer to a distributor to a retailer or even a customer, and then back to, say, a 3PL or replenishment facility, and then back to the producer to restart the loop all over again. This closed loop approach certainly isn't novel, but we now have the ability to provide much greater levels of visibility into the state of the assets and the products in this loop, identifying bottlenecks and slippage, really reduce waste and increase efficiency, and even enable a process that may not have made sense without that kind of visibility. But what's really important here on this slide is that with one investment in the right IoT platform, you're future-proofed in a way to cover both types of needs should they change or evolve in the future. So I think, again, this takes us to the next slide, Michael, which I think you're going to highlight, unless there's something you wanted to add there.
No, I'll highlight it here. I think, we'll jump in. I mean, Stas had mentioned returnable assets, and it has really taken off over the last year as far as what people are doing. And companies are tracking everything from returnable pallets to reusable plastic containers to shipping racks for glass and automotive parts. And as you can see here, it's tracking it all the way through the distribution center, back out to the reseller, then back on the road, back over to the customer's facility, and then knowing where it is while it's at the customer facility, and then can make its loop back to where it started. When what we're finding here is not just about the cost of the asset, but it's also about ensuring your assets are in the right place at the right time to prevent any manufacturing downtime. And with the automobile industry especially, we're finding that that's been really critical there, because it's more about knowing the racks are in the right place to ensure that just-in-time inventory stays just in time, so that it's not delayed. So that's become really important. We also have a customer who's tracking just, you look at some of these, and as Stas was talking about, the cost of some of these, it's not that great, but there's still the desire to know where they are. So, with the racks used in the automobile industry, those are pretty expensive, so it makes sense to track all of them. When you get into plastic returnable containers, it's a much lower cost. We have one that's actually not tracking all of them, but a percentage. And what they're finding is that when they find one, there's generally another 10 with it. So, you don't necessarily have to track every single piece of equipment or every single returnable container, but even tracking a percentage can make a big difference in what you're finding out. So we also have one client that had their returnable metal racks, and they were actually finding that when they got to the customer's facility and they got unloaded, all the stuff was taken off of it. They weren't immediately coming back. They were getting used to take stuff to their clients, all other types of things, and it would take months for them to get it back. So they also found that, which clients are abusing that, so I can go address it. I've got some clients that are doing a very good job in getting them back, and then others where it's very clear they could see them leave their facility and go to one of their clients' facilities. So these are the things that you can learn when you are able to track things and get better utilization of all these returnable assets.
Yeah, Michael, I'll just jump here for a quick second.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another message I wanted to capture from the graphics you see on the slide here is the power and the value of a seamlessly integrated indoor and outdoor solution, or what we call AirFinder on-site and AirFinder everywhere, and a population of tags that can operate seamlessly in both environments, giving you all the precision and battery performance you would need in your warehouse or pick and pack operation or processing facility. But then have those tagged items be able to leave the warehouse and conduct their trip to whatever their next destination is, but continue to provide you with that visibility and data to continue to manage their flow and identify problems or errors or bottlenecks so that you can react and respond. And this reminds me and makes me think of how even just a few years ago, we would engage with customers on maybe just a single point solution. So a customer may say, you know, I have a pain point and I'm mostly interested in or need to track material flow within my warehouse, or moving from a secondary warehouse down the road for order consolidation in this warehouse. Or another customer may say, I simply can't find certain inventory items since you know, my forklift operators, they move pallets around to get at other pallets and I lose track of where everything is. You know, someone else would say, I don't have an understanding of how long certain goods have been sitting in my warehouse in certain pallet locations, or I need to know how long items are sitting in my staging area, or even where something is in my staging area, or, you know, why am I seeing variability between the shifts in overall efficiency and throughput and so on. So today what we're finding is the ask is, I need all of the above, or I need a comprehensive view of what's happening in my entire warehouse or operations, and even between them, and ultimately all the way through to my customers. And this request is also coming from higher levels in the organization. So it's not just from the site operations managers, but all the way up to the CXO level. In other words, these are becoming strategic initiatives as opposed to tactical ones that require extensible solutions. You know, point solutions just don't cut it anymore. Any questions before I go into the next slide, Jennifer?
Not right now, thanks.
Okay, emergence of new business model is our fifth trend. I think it's the last trend before we go on to the next item on the agenda. So one of the things that we've discovered and learned through some of our client engagements is this development in new business models, given these new levels of visibility that we've been discussing and we can provide, where these business models have an inherent assumption of risk, particularly inventory risk around the product or goods due to spoilage, for example, in food and grocery distribution, or other types of loss, like lost reusable shipping fixtures and containers, or even pallets. That risk has usually been borne by the manufacturer or the initial provider, but with IoT visibility, suddenly, say a distributor or a logistics provider may be willing to take on that risk and launch a completely new business model that could be quite disruptive and innovative and competitive in the broader market. And when I say they take on that risk, part of what's being accomplished here is to identify where and why losses are taking place, you know, how to prevent and reduce those instances, and even find grounds to recover associated costs from the at-fault party and say an end-to-end supply chain process. And Michael already spoke to a couple of examples of that. So continuing with this example of food distribution or spoilage driving waste costs, especially now given supply chain challenges and delays, is it the producer or the packager or the distributor, the logistics provider, the grocery store who holds and manages this risk? I think you can see that with increased knowledge and data that report location and temperature history in near real time, it becomes feasible for all of those players to either take on or to mitigate risk as a way to be able to implement these new business models and expand their control and ownership and revenue being generated by the broader end-to-end process. Another example of this, well, I think that's probably enough on the example side, and we may get a little bit repetitive. Anything you want to add to that, Michael, before we go on to final thoughts and Q&A?
No, I think we'll move a little bit into the solution next, and I can talk about some things there. So.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah, so let me, we wanted to just spend a few minutes here to highlight the solutions we have to address many of these trends. So I'm going to start with our AirFinder Everywhere platform. We have two main platforms, AirFinder Everywhere and AirFinder On Site. So I'm going to start with this. The AirFinder Everywhere, we also refer to it many times as the Super Tag. This really gives you the ability to do that seamless indoor to outdoor tracking. As Stas mentioned earlier, these devices can operate independently outside, or they can operate inside in our AirFinder on-site platforms in a BLE environment. So very dynamic devices. The three that you see there, the only difference is the largest one has a much bigger battery. The one in the middle has kind of a average size battery that will last anywhere from 2 to 4 years. And then the smallest one is a rechargeable battery. So different options there to meet all your different types of needs. These, they give you the ability to track assets all the way from, a distribution center out to your customer's location. You can also track high value equipment in between locations. But all four devices also allow you to, they do a blend of 4 technologies to get to the location accuracy that you want. So let's jump to the next slide and I'll talk about that. Here they are. So all 4 devices have the capability to do cell ID, GPS, Wi-Fi, and BLE with AirFinder on site. If you need the most accurate, you would jump to GPS and BLE, GPS for outdoor needs, and AirFinder on site with BLE for your inside. If you want to conserve your battery, then you can jump to Wi-Fi and cell tower when you're outside. Because we all know, and maybe not everybody knows, GPS is definitely a battery hog. So depending on, even if you have really strong GPS, it still takes a lot of battery. And then if you have weak GPS, you're really going to eat up your battery. So that's why we recommend, and that's why we give options here. And we allow you to pick the one that fits best for your application. And we will actually work with you on that. And we have our engineers have built battery calculators that actually allow to put in, okay, what's your exact environment that they're going to be in? And how often do you want them to report? We can look at all the different parameters that we can change there for you to see if we can get to the right battery length for you that's still giving you the amount of data that you want. So a lot of flexibility there in these devices. Stas, did you want to add anything before I jump to AirFinder on site?
Other than this ability to select not just the order, but what you rely on, I think is particularly important. One of the things that we learned relatively recently, we use cell ID as a way to provide location information. The good news from that is that quite often that's really the only way for you to get some, because you could be in an indoor environment, is in a very remote rural area, there's no Wi-Fi infrastructure, you don't get a GPS signal. So that's great if you can take advantage of that. The bad news is that the accuracy is so bad. And what we discovered is we had customers were giving us some feedback that, wow, it doesn't look like your location information is as accurate as what we were expecting. And what was really happening was that we were providing them with location information that, yes, was less accurate, but was in areas where before they would have got no information at all. Now, that can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing depending on the use case. And so this ability to reorder and include or exclude how you go about determining location, I think is a powerful feature.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we jump to the next slide? And I'll talk a little bit about our Air Finder on site. So this is our robust platform for indoors that will give you the accuracy that you need. We actually have 2 versions of this platform. So we will help you choose which one is right for you based on the accuracy you need and the environment where we're going to be installing. It's very adaptive based on that. Both of these allow you to, if you wanted to install in a portion of your facility and then expand later, they absolutely will do that as well. Both versions have several options for tags. Once again, we'll help pick the right tag with you. We don't leave that up to you. We want to pick what's the right form factor, as well as what gets you the right battery life, and then what fits that environment. Is there going to be water involved ever? What kind of things do we need to make sure we are planning for? So we'll help you with all of those things to make sure. The other thing I want to point out here that I think is really different and unique for us is, we have our gateway that comes into your environment via cellular. We then blanket the building with our own network. It's a LoRa network. It's a 900 megahertz platform, so that we don't have to jump on your Wi-Fi. We're not relying on any of your IT infrastructure. So it's a completely independent system, which our customers absolutely love. It allows us to give them more security around this, as well as we don't have to utilize any of your environment, which could become problematic in some cases. So a lot of flexibility here for the Air Finder on site.
We touched
Jennifer,
briefly
do we
on
have any questions?
Yeah, we touched briefly on the costs and the life before, but just pointing out some of these tags can last up to 7 years, and with tags being the largest cost of an on-site system, that can really drive down the overall cost and provide more ROI by extending these tags. So you've got small tags, not much bigger than a quarter, a little bit thicker, but those are lasting up to 7 years, which is great technology and way to really expand the system.
Right. Yeah, and I think Jennifer just highlighted one of the differences. I mentioned we have 2 platforms. One is based on BLE and one is based on XLE, which is extra low energy. And the XLE gives you a higher level of accuracy, but it also helps you tremendously in the battery life of your tags. But once again, it's going to depend on the environment and the accuracy you need, which one is the best fit for you.
Sounds good. No other questions?
Okay, well, let's jump to the next slide, and I'll talk a little bit about our UI. So both of our platforms, whether it's the everywhere or the indoors, the on-site, come with a user interface, and you can see a few samples of that user interface right here. The UI allows you to see all of your assets in a list form, or you can see them on a floor plan for your indoors or a US map for the outdoors. For your outdoor tags, you can also see the history. And you'll be able to see the route that they took when they're traveling outside. And a lot of that's going to depend on the granularity around how much data you're going to see. It's all based on the parameters that we would help you set, which is how often are those tags reporting their location. Then the last part, one of the slides I'll mention here is our analytics. There on the bottom left. So we have built an integration with Tableau to provide custom analytics for our clients. This is a big trend that we're seeing with our clients wanting custom reporting. It's become very important for users to have the access to the data they need in the format that they need, and to have that very quickly. And what we're doing with our clients is, rather than just giving them, here's a summary of your data, they need it in a format so that they can quickly have actionable data. How are they going to act on the data that we're presenting? And that's what we're building for them, is the ability to quickly see that so that they can find that data and act on it quickly. And our reports, any of these reports allow you to filter on the, the zone, the tag, the category. You can also change some of the time frames so that if you're looking for idle assets as an example, and you want to see which assets have been idle for 30 days, if you now say, well, gosh, that's not very many, let me look at how many have been in, idle for 15 days. Just quickly change that parameter, and now you've got a new report that shows you that information. And I'll just give you one example. We had a client recently write to us to say that they had used our platform, that they had a purchase order for 30 new devices in their hospital environment. They quickly went and looked at the reports here and said, wait a minute, I see 30 that have been idle for over a month. So I'm going to give you the 30 you need right now because I know they haven't been used in 30 days. So they actually prevented a major purchase by having the data and having it real time. So a lot of value there to our clients. The other thing is, if you don't want to use our UI and you want to integrate this into your own platform, we allow that as well. So we have APIs that would allow you to do that integration easily. And I will say our largest clients are using that quite often. Stas, anything you wanted to add here, or we can jump to final thoughts?
You covered it nicely.
Question on if we are
question.
capable to work in Europe.
I missed the question there, Jennifer, the last part.
Sorry, is the solution capable to work in Europe?
Right now, it is not able to work in Europe. We are working on a new gateway that would allow us to move into Europe, and that should be ready in a few months. Any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, the only other thing I'll just mention on the European side, on our AirFinder Everywhere, we're actually doing some testing. We've actually got some of those devices over in Europe right now, and we're going through finalization around some antenna optimization to operate over there, although we can do testing right now. So if anyone had a need and wanted to do some testing in any particular country, we can support that with the SuperTag AirFinder Everywhere solution.
And I'm sorry, when I answered the question around the gateway that's coming, that was related to AirFinder on-site. So I should have clarified that.
Sounds good. All right, final thoughts and questions.
Yeah, I mean, I can wrap things up, and in case there's any more questions that come in, give a couple of minutes there. But in terms of final thoughts, maybe I'll just review some of the key points that we're making. The first one was around this notion of digital transformation. And what we've seen happen is there's been a real step change in the urgency for that digital transformation, particularly in the logistics domain. I think the change in consumption patterns and labor shortages, even the supply chain disruptions that we've all been experiencing, or at least the volatility there, I think that's going to become business as usual. So that's something we need to get used to, and or at least prepare and plan around it to deal with it in the long term. IoT affordability, we talked about that. It's much greater today than ever before, and the trend will continue to go down on the cost side, which is going to further broaden adoption. Our ability to support a breadth of use cases makes it really impactful and transformative to our customers. We can help them with efficiency, give them competitive advantages, and create new opportunities from a business model perspective. And finally, I think we'll only see an acceleration of IoT adoption to really achieve all of the things that we've talked about today, including the kind of lists that I just went through.
Thanks.
So with that, I don't know if there are any other questions, Jennifer, or if we wrap up.
we can wrap up. Thanks for attending, everybody. We will be sending out a video of the recording and follow-up materials. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.